The flight landed at 11:47 at night. Adaeze knew the exact time because she had been watching the clock on her phone since they crossed into Nigerian airspace, watching it the way you watch something you have been waiting for so long that the waiting itself has become a habit you are not sure how to stop. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days since she had last seen Lagos from above. 3 years of double shifts at the hospital in London. 3 years of sending money home every month with the specific faithful regularity of someone who believes that consistency is its own form of love. She had not told Emeka she was coming. She wanted to see his face. That was the thought she had carried through the entire flight, through the turbulence over the Sahara and the crying child 3 rows back, and the in-flight meal she did not eat because her stomach was already full of anticipation. She wanted to see his face when he opened the door and found her standing there with her suitcase and her tired eyes, and 3 years of missing him compressed into the specific, physical fact of her presence. She had imagined it many times. She had imagined him lifting her off the ground. She had imagined the smell of him. The particular smell of Emeka, which was warm and familiar and irreplaceable in the way that the smell of home is irreplaceable when you have been away from it long enough. She had imagined him saying, "You came back," as if it needed saying, as if she had ever been going anywhere except back. The arrivals hall at Murtala Muhammad was its usual full-volume self. Carts and families and drivers holding signs, and the specific quality of noise that Nigerian airports produce, which is not chaos exactly, but something that feels like the city introducing itself before you have fully arrived. She moved through it with her single large suitcase and her carry-on and the small gold bracelet on her wrist that Emeka had fastened there the morning she left. "Hold the fort," he had said. "I will." A driver she had arranged from London was waiting near the exit. He recognized her from the photo she had sent. He took her suitcase without being asked and led her to a car that smelled of air freshener and the specific plastic-warm smell of a vehicle that runs the airport route many times a day. She sat in the back and watched Lagos assemble itself through the window. The lights and the generators and the nighthawkers and the enormous, indifferent energy of a city that does not pause for anyone's homecoming. If you have ever crossed an ocean for someone, spent years of your life working for something you believed in, and traveled home in the night with your heart full of a life you thought you were building, stay with me. Because what happened at that door changed everything I thought I knew about trust. Her neighborhood appeared ahead, familiar streets, familiar turns, the particular sequence of corners she had driven 1,000 times. The compound wall came into view. Her compound. The house she had paid for with 3 years of night shifts and missed birthdays, and the kind of loneliness that you don't name, because naming it makes it harder to carry. She noticed something immediately. The security light near the balcony was new. The curtains were not the ones she had chosen. She had chosen cream. These were green. The front garden had been replanted. She remembered the white flowers she had put in the ground herself the week before she left. These were not white flowers, she told herself. He renovated. He wanted to surprise her too. The driver honked. A security guard she had never seen came to the gate. He looked at her with the practiced assessment of someone who has been given instructions about who belongs and who does not. She was carrying a suitcase she had packed in London. She had the address memorized in her bones. She did not belong on the wrong side of that gate. She said, "I live here. Call Emeka." The guard's expression did something subtle that she would understand later. He said, "Oga travels since yesterday. He is not in Lagos." Her excitement adjusted, but did not collapse. She had keys. She had always had keys. She pressed them into the lock, and the lock did not turn. She stood at the door of her own house with her key in her hand, and the key did not work. She knocked. Footsteps from inside. Light, quick footsteps, not Emeka's footsteps. She knew Emeka's footsteps. These were not his. The door opened. Nkechi stood in the doorway. Nkechi, who had been her best friend since their second year at the University of Lagos. Nkechi, who had cried at Adaeze's airport farewell. Nkechi, who sent voice notes every Sunday and asked how the London weather was treating her. Nkechi, who was standing in Adaeze's doorway wearing Adaeze's blue cotton wrapper, her hair tied with Adaeze's favorite headscarf, barefoot on the tiles that Adaeze had chosen and paid for. Neither of them spoke. The world did not end. It just became very still. Adaeze looked at her friend. Nkechi looked at Adaeze with an expression that was trying to be several things at once and succeeding at none of them. Adaeze said, "What are you doing in my house?" The living room behind Nkechi had changed. The grey couches she had ordered from a store on Lagos Island were gone, replaced with darker ones, chosen by someone with different taste. The family portrait she had hung above the television, herself and Emeka at their wedding. The photographer had caught something real in that picture, something that had always made her feel grounded when she looked at it, was gone. In its place, abstract art she did not recognize. Emeka's shoes were by the staircase, arranged differently than he arranged them. A perfume she did not own had replaced the air of her own home. Nkechi stepped outside, pulling the door half closed behind her. She said quietly, "Lower your voice. Lower your voice." Adaeze looked at her. She said, "You are standing in my house wearing my clothes, and you are telling me to lower my voice." The security guard had found something important to look at on the other side of the compound. Nkechi said, "Let me explain. It is not what it looks like." Adaeze said, "Then what does it look like?" The silence between them was the specific silence of an answer that both of them already knew. She pushed past Nkechi and walked into her house. The scent hit her before anything else. A woman's perfume. Not hers. On the center table, 2 wine glasses. One had lipstick on the rim. Not her lipstick. A shade she did not own. She walked to the staircase. Nkechi followed, whispering her name. "Adaeze, please, Adaeze." The master bedroom door was open. The bed linen was not the set she had bought before leaving. The walls were painted a different color. She had chosen white. This was a warm beige, the color someone else had decided was better. On the dresser, where her photograph had stood beside Emeka's since their wedding, there was a different frame. A beach photograph. Emeka and Nkechi, close enough that the space between them was not the space between friends. 3 years. 3 years of wiring money every month. 3 years of 12-hour shifts in a hospital ward where the floors smelled of antiseptic and effort. 3 years of calling every night and saying "I miss you" and meaning it completely. 3 years of her father's funeral she attended on video call because the flight was too expensive and the savings had to be protected, and Emeka had said, "Don't worry. I will represent both of us at the burial. I will hold your mother's hand." 3 years. Her phone rang. Emeka. Both women looked at the screen. Adaeze answered. She said, "Hello." His voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who has had time to prepare for a conversation. He said, "Linda." He used the English version of her name, the one only he used, the one that had always felt like intimacy and now felt like a signal she had misread for years. "Where are you?" She looked around the bedroom that was no longer hers. She said, "I am home." A pause. Then, "You should have told me you were coming. I wanted to surprise you." Another pause. Longer. The pause of a man deciding which version of the truth to offer. He said, "We need to talk." She almost smiled. She said, "Yes, we do." Downstairs, rain began to fall against the windows of the house she had paid for, and in the bedroom that had been redecorated without her knowledge, with sheets she had not chosen and photographs she had not taken, Adaeze Obinwosu stood very still and understood something that she had been not understanding for a long time. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was still coming. And it would arrive with Emeka 40 minutes later, through the same door she had been unable to open with her own key. She sat on the edge of the bed and waited. She did not cry. She was not ready to cry. Crying was for after. After she understood the full shape of what had happened, after she had all the information, after she had heard it from his mouth in this room, in this house that smelled of someone else's perfume. Right now, she needed to be the woman she had learned to be in 3 years of night shifts and loneliness, and the specific discipline of someone who survives by not falling apart until the appropriate moment. Nkechi sat in the corner chair, Adaeze's chair, the one she had read in on Sunday mornings before the idea of London had arrived and changed everything, and wept quietly. Small, private weeping. The weeping of someone who knows they are guilty and has not yet decided what to do with that knowledge. Adaeze looked at her. She said, "How long?" Nkechi's weeping paused. She said, "What? How long have you been living here?" The hesitation was its own answer. Then, almost 2 years. 2 years. 1 year after Adaeze had left, Nkechi had moved into her house, while sending her Sunday voice notes asking how the London weather was, while saying, "We miss you," while saying, "Emeka is managing, but he needs you home," while saying all the things that a best friend says when she is performing a friendship she has already dismantled from the inside. She said, "He told me the house was too big for him alone." Adaeze said nothing. He said there had been break-ins in the area. He needed someone to stay. Nkechi's voice was soft, with the specific softness of a person trying to make something sound reasonable that is not reasonable. It happened gradually. Adaeze looked at her. She said, "Betrayal usually does." Headlights swept through the rain against the window. Emeka was home. His footsteps on the stairs were familiar. She had known them for 11 years, through courtship and marriage, and 3 years of phone calls where she had closed her eyes and tried to hear the house through the sound of his voice. The same footsteps, the same specific rhythm. Everything else had changed, and these were still the same, and somehow that made it worse. He appeared in the bedroom doorway. He stopped. He looked at her the way people look at something they were not prepared to see. And then, in the space of 2 seconds, she watched his face do the specific thing that faces do when they are deciding how to position themselves. The guilt was there. She saw it. And then something harder replaced it. He said, "Linda." She said, "Emeka." Nkechi stood from the chair. She said, "I will go downstairs." Adaeze said, "Stay." Nkechi looked at Emeka. He gave a small nod. She stayed. Adaeze looked at her husband. He was well fed. His beard was neat. His wrist carried a watch she did not recognize, expensive, new, purchased with money she had not seen in any of the account statements he sent her. He did not look like a man who had been holding the fort. He looked like a man who had been living comfortably in a life she had funded and rebuilt without her knowledge. He said, "You changed the locks." She made it a statement, not a question. He said, "Things changed." She said, "Explain that to me." He ran his hand through his hair, the familiar gesture, the one she had watched 1,000 times. She felt nothing looking at it now except the specific, cold clarity of someone who is finally seeing clearly. He said, "We cannot do this in anger." She said, "I am not angry. I am listening." He looked at Nkechi. Then he looked at his wife. And he said the thing that people say when they have decided to stop pretending. He said, "You left." The simplicity of it stunned her. She said, "I left to build this house." He said, "You abandoned the marriage." She said, "Did I stop calling? Did I stop sending money? Did I miss a single month?" He said, "You changed. You became distant." Everything was about shifts and overtime. You sounded tired, she said. I was tired. I was working for us. He stepped closer. He said, marriage is not built on money alone. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, neither is it built on sleeping with your wife's best friend. Nkechi flinched. Emeka's expression hardened. He said, watch your words. She said, you changed the locks on my house. You replaced my photographs. You decorated my bedroom for another woman. And you are asking me to watch my words. The rain intensified outside. Somewhere downstairs, a clock ticked in the way that clocks tick in rooms where important things are being decided. Too loudly, too steadily, indifferent to the human weight of the moment. He said, this is not only about betrayal. She said, then what is it about? He said, you were not planning to come back. The sentence stopped her. He said, you found a life there, a career, friends. I could hear it in your voice. You were building something that did not include me. She said, I was building something for us. He said, you never brought me. She said, you never asked to come. The accusation and the counter-accusation hung in the air between them like two things that had been said and could not be unsaid. Nkechi looked at the floor. Emeka looked at Adaeze with the specific expression of a man who has been rehearsing a version of this conversation and is discovering that the actual version is harder. He said, I did not plan to fall in love with her. The room went very quiet. Adaeze heard the rain. She heard the clock. She heard her own breathing, steady and controlled, the breathing of a woman who has practiced not falling apart and is practicing it now with everything she has. She said, love. He said, yes. She looked at him. She looked at Nkechi. She looked at the bedroom that had been redecorated in her absence, at the sheets she had not chosen, at the photograph of two people at a beach where she had never been. Then she walked past both of them, down the stairs, to where her suitcase still stood by the front door. They followed. She crouched beside the suitcase and opened the hidden compartment inside, the flat one, the one built into the frame, the one she used for documents because she had learned, in 3 years of navigating foreign bureaucracy, that important things need to be kept in places that are not easily lost. She removed a brown envelope. She stood up. She placed it on the dining table. Emeka said, what is that? She looked at him steadily. She said, everything you thought I didn't know. Emeka looked at the envelope the way people look at things they are afraid of, but cannot admit they are afraid of, with a studied casualness that does not convince anyone in the room. He said, open it. She said, you open it. It has your name on it. He picked it up. His hands were steady. She noticed. She had always noticed his hands. They were the first thing she had noticed about him, at a university party 11 years ago. The way he held his drink with a certain unhurried confidence. Those same hands had held her face at the airport departure gate 3 years ago. Those same hands had, apparently, signed documents she had not seen and changed locks she had paid for and arranged a life inside her house that had no space for her in it. He opened the envelope. Inside were 4 documents. He removed them slowly, unfolding each one, his expression shifting in the specific way that expressions shift when someone is reading something they did not expect to exist. The first was a bank statement. Not his, not hers. A joint statement from an account she had opened in London, an international marital asset account, established 18 months ago with a solicitor in Islington, whose name appeared at the top of the second document. The second document was a legal certificate of registration, a marital property protection agreement, filed under dual jurisdiction law, covering all assets purchased with foreign income during the marriage. He said, "This is foreign law. It cannot apply here." She said, "Read the third page." He turned to it. His jaw tightened. The third document was a letter from a Nigerian law firm, Okafor and Associates, Lagos Island, confirming that they had been retained by Adaeze Chizomobi Nwosu regarding the property at the compound address, and that based on documented financial contributions, their client held a legally protected interest in the asset that could not be transferred, sold, or legally encumbered without her consent. The letter was dated 4 days ago. She had arranged it from London before she boarded the flight. Nkechi sat down slowly in one of the dark couches, the ones that were not Adeze's couches, the ones someone had chosen without her. She pressed her hands together in her lap. Emeka set the papers down. He said, "You planned this." She said, "I planned for every possibility. That is what you learn when you spend 3 years carrying everything alone." She sat across from him. "You were going to file for divorce next month." He looked up sharply. She said, "I know that too." The room was very still. Nkechi's voice came out barely above a whisper. She said, "How?" Adaeze looked at her. She said, "Someone contacted me. 8 months ago. Anonymous emails at first, then photographs, then account records." She paused. I did not want to believe it. I deleted the first 3. Then I started reading. Emeka stood abruptly. He said, "Who? Who has been watching this house?" She said, "Does it matter?" "It matters." His voice was sharp now, the sharpness of a man who has been exposed and has redirected his anger at the exposure rather than at himself, which is the oldest deflection available. "Someone has been invading our privacy. Someone has been—" She said, "Someone told me the truth." She said it quietly. "You were going to file for divorce next month, transfer the property into a new name, and I would have received the papers in London, having no idea what I was signing away." She looked at him steadily. That was the plan. He said nothing. Nkechi covered her mouth with her hand. Adaeze continued. "The transfers I made for the business expansion last year. 47,000 naira in 3 separate transactions. They went to an account that is not the business account." She slid the 4th document across the table, a printed record of wire transfers, the destination account highlighted in yellow. "I had a financial analyst in London trace it. It took him 6 days. Emeka's composure was deteriorating in the specific, gradual way that composure deteriorates when the ground beneath it is removed piece by piece. He said, "That money was for operational costs." She said, "The account belongs to Nkechi." The silence that followed was the loudest silence in the room so far. Nkechi's eyes filled. She said, "Emeka." He said, "Nkechi, don't." She said, "I did not know about the divorce plan. I did not know about the transfers." She was speaking to Adaeze now, directly, with the desperate clarity of someone who has just discovered that the person they trusted has not been fully honest with them either. "I knew about us. I did not know about the rest." Adaeze looked at her former best friend. She said, "Then you were deceived by the same man who deceived me." She said it without satisfaction, just as a fact. "The difference is that you were inside the house, and I was outside it." Nkechi began to cry. Real crying this time, not the controlled weeping from upstairs, but something that came from a deeper place, the crying of a woman who has just understood the shape of what she participated in and cannot make it smaller by weeping. Emeka sat back down. He said, "I needed to secure myself. You were building a future abroad. I could see it, the promotions, the contacts, the life you were creating there." He looked at the table. "I felt like a placeholder, something you maintained until you decided what you actually wanted." Adaeze said, "So instead of asking me, you secured yourself." He said, "Yes." She said, "With my money, and my best friend and my house." He had no answer. She said, "Emeka, look at me." He looked at her. She said, "Did I ever once, in 11 years, give you a reason to believe I was not coming back for you? One time. Tell me one specific moment when I said or did something that made you believe I had decided to leave you. He opened his mouth, closed it. The evidence he was searching for did not exist, and he knew it. She said, "You made a decision based on your own fear, and you dressed it up as my failure." She said it without shouting, without tears, with the specific, quiet devastation of someone who has had 8 months to process something and has arrived at clarity. "That is the truth of what happened here," he said. "You cannot reduce it to that." She said, "I am not reducing it. I am naming it accurately." The rain had stopped while they were talking. Outside, the Lagos night had gone quiet in the way it goes quiet after rain, temporarily, as if the city is taking a breath before resuming. A generator hummed somewhere 2 compounds over. The clock on the wall continued its indifferent marking of time. Nkechi spoke. She said, "There is something else you both need to know." Both of them looked at her. She said, "I am pregnant." The room changed, not dramatically. No one moved, no voice was raised, nothing fell or broke. But something shifted in the quality of the air, the way air shifts when the weight of a conversation increases beyond what the room was built for. Emeka looked at Nkechi with an expression that was trying to contain several things simultaneously. Adaeze looked at Nkechi with the specific, still expression of someone who has been processing one category of information and has just been handed a different category entirely. She said, "How far?" Nkechi said, 14 weeks. Adaeze nodded slowly. She said, "And you are telling me now because—" Nkechi said, "Because you deserve to know the full truth. All of it, not pieces." She looked at Emeka. "I will not hide this. I told him 2 weeks ago. He asked me to wait until he had spoken to a lawyer." Emeka said, "Nkechi." She said, "No." She said it firmly, the first firm thing she had said since the door opened. No more waiting, no more managing information. She looked at Adaeze. "I am sorry. I know that does not fix anything. I know it is the smallest possible thing I can say for the largest possible thing I did." She wiped her eyes. "But I am telling you everything because you have been sitting here for 2 hours being lied to by omission, and you deserve the complete truth." Adaeze looked at her for a long time. She said, "Thank you for telling me." Nkechi looked surprised, as if she had been prepared for anger, and the absence of it was harder. Adaeze stood. She said, "Emeka, I will be using the guest room tonight." He started to speak. She said, "I paid for it." She said it simply. "Tomorrow morning, my lawyer will contact yours. We will begin the legal process properly." She picked up her handbag from the floor where she had set it when she came in. "The financial documentation goes to Okafor and Associates tonight. I will send it digitally. The property cannot be moved before this is resolved." She paused. "If you attempt to transfer anything before the legal process is complete, the documents I have constitute grounds for a fraud investigation. I am not threatening you. I am telling you what the documents say." Emeka said, "Linda." She stopped. He said, "I was afraid of losing you." She turned. She looked at him, at this man she had loved for 11 years. At this man whose face she had missed on night shifts in a foreign country. At this man whose photograph she had kept beside her bed in a flat in London that smelled of instant coffee and the specific loneliness of someone a long way from home. She said, "I know." He said, "Does that mean anything?" She said, "It means I understand why you were afraid." She paused. "It does not mean you get to keep what you built with that fear." She walked upstairs to the guest room. She closed the door. She sat on the bed in the dark for a long time without turning on the light. She thought about the flat in London with its instant coffee and its small window, that looked onto a grey courtyard. She thought about the night shifts, and the Sunday calls, and the money she had wired month after month, with the faith of someone who believes that love is proved by consistency. She thought about what it cost to be consistent for 3 years in a foreign country, while the thing you were being consistent for was quietly becoming something else. She did not cry. She would cry later. There would be a time for that. A private, unhurried time, without an audience, without performance, without anyone watching her process the specific grief of discovering that sacrifice does not guarantee preservation. But that time was not now. Now she needed sleep. She lay down on the guest room bed and listened to the Lagos night outside, the generators and the occasional horn, and the distant sound of music from somewhere that had no idea her life had come apart and back together in the same evening. She thought, I built this house. I'm sleeping in it. That is something. She slept. In the morning, she woke before anyone else. She dressed carefully. She went downstairs and made herself tea in the kitchen that had been rearranged. Cups in different cupboards, a different brand of milk in the fridge, small evidence everywhere of a life that had moved on without her. She made her tea and stood at the kitchen window and watched the compound in the early light. The white flowers she had planted were gone, pink ones in their place. She would plant white ones again. Footsteps on the stairs. Emeka. He came into the kitchen looking like a man who had not slept, which was accurate. He looked at her standing at the window with her tea and said nothing for a moment. Then he said, She left last night. Adaeze said, I know. I heard the gate. He said, She took some things. She said, This was always going to happen. She said it without cruelty. When something is built on a secret, it does not survive the secret's exposure. She looked at him. You know that. He sat down at the kitchen table. He looked at his hands. The expensive watch was gone from his wrist. She noticed, but said nothing about it. He said, Is there any possibility at all? She said, Of what? He said, Of us. She turned to face him fully. She said, The man I married would have called me when he was afraid. He would have said, I feel like I am losing you. He would have given me the chance to say, You are not losing me. I am coming back. She set her tea down. You did not do that. You decided what was true, and you acted on it, and you involved my closest friend, and you planned to remove me legally from my own assets. She paused. That is not a marriage that can be repaired. That is a marriage that ended by someone's choice, and it was not my choice. He said, I made mistakes. She said, yes. He said, big ones. She said, yes. He said, I don't know how to fix this. She said, you cannot fix it. You can only accept it and let the process happen correctly. He looked at the table. He said, the child. She said, that is between you and Nkechi. It has nothing to do with me. She said it with the clarity of someone who has decided exactly which things belong to her and which things do not. I will not carry that. It is not mine to carry. He said, she will need support. Adaeze said, then support her. She picked up her tea. That is your responsibility now. I wish her well with it. She said this last thing and meant it. Not easily, not without cost, but genuinely in the specific way that people who have decided to be honest with themselves manage to mean things that are hard to mean. He looked at her. He said, you are remarkable. She said, I know. She said it without vanity. I have known that for a long time. I am sorry it took all of this for you to see it. She finished her tea. She rinsed her cup and placed it in the drying rack and walked upstairs to pack the things that were still hers in this house, which was still legally hers, which she would not be living in while the legal process resolved. Because some spaces, once filled with something that cannot be unfilled, require time before they can be reclaimed. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. The compound was evaluated. Adaeze's documented financial contributions gave her the majority stake in the asset. Emeka received a settlement and moved to a smaller flat in Surulere. He did not contest the final ruling. His lawyer had looked at the documents from Okafor and Associates and advised him clearly that contestation would not serve him. Nkechi had the baby, a boy, in the 7th month. She sent Adaeze a message the day he was born. A single line. "He is healthy. Thank you for not destroying everything." Adaeze read it twice and did not reply, which was not cruelty, but simply the honest acknowledgement that some chapters close without a final scene, and that is acceptable. Adaeze did not go back to London. She opened a private nursing consultancy in Lagos, using her international certifications and 3 years of experience and the specific practical intelligence of a woman who has learned that the skills you build in survival become the foundation of the life you build in recovery. It grew slowly, then steadily. She hired 3 nurses in the first year and 5 in the second. She planted white flowers in the front garden. She rehung the family portrait, not the wedding photograph which she had packed away, but a photograph of herself that a colleague had taken on her first day back in Lagos, standing in front of the compound gate with her suitcase beside her, and the specific expression of someone who has arrived somewhere and is not leaving. She looked at that photograph sometimes in the mornings when she came downstairs. She looked like a woman who knew exactly what she had built and exactly what she was willing to protect. Not because she was hard, but because she had learned, at real cost, across real time, through real sacrifice, the difference between a woman who waits to be valued and a woman who knows her value and arranges her life accordingly. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever worked for something and trusted someone and come home to find that the trust cost more than you knew, subscribe to Tales of Tears African and ring the bell. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that coming home to betrayal is not the end. It is the beginning of something that belongs entirely to you. Leave a comment telling us, what was the moment in this story that hit hardest? We read every one. We are here every week. The next story is already waiting, and it begins, as all the best ones do, with a woman who walked through a door she did not expect, and came out the other side knowing exactly who she was.